In this step-by-step botanical painting tutorial, I'll show you how to paint these colourful, vibrant Gerbera daisies in watercolour, so if you want to know how, don't go anywhere. Before we dive into this week's tutorial, I'm delighted to announce that this video is sponsored by Evolve. Evolve are an online art education platform where they will teach you how to go from this to this in just 1 year. I'll tell you a bit more about Evolve later in this video, and I'll also let you know how you can get $100 off the full course. But for now, let's press on with the tutorial. So I've traced down the Gerbera daisies already on my mixed media paper, and we have a free line drawing and a reference photograph, and I'll tell you a little bit later on how you can gain access to these. So quick material run through here. I am using Mungo paints, but please use whatever colours you have, and I've chosen yellow orange, scarlet, permanent red, ultramarine, deep phthalo green and sap, but just use the nearest colours that you have. And the colour chart that I'm using here is how I selected the colours that I needed to the reference photograph. And the brushes I'm using are from Rosemary Co, various sizes spotter brushes which have shorter bristles and also a flat synthetic brush, and everything will be in the description box underneath this video. I've chosen to use mixed media paper today, and I'll explain why a little later on. Okay, so we have our line drawing done, we have our paints, our kitchen towel to pat our brush on, clean water, and we are good to go. So I've mixed a watery mix of yellow orange here on my palette, and I'm going to do another petal of yellow orange with a bit of scarlet to give it a really sort of vibrant orange tone. And I do apologize for my hair in shot there. Okay, so we're mixing this up to a sort of watery consistency, and we're going to be applying this wet on dry onto our mixed media paper. This is a number 4 size spotter, and I really like these brushes because it does give me full control, allowing me to apply the paint rather like a felt tip pen. You can see how I've dropped in the yellow orange onto each petal, and I'm dropping in scarlet at the top here to just gently let it merge into the wet paint. Now you don't have to drop in the scarlet at this point, but it's just a really good way of giving you control, and you can kind of see how the underpainting will look. But for now, let's continue to add the yellow orange tone to each of the petals in turn. We're painting each petal with a yellow colour because, as you can see from the reference photograph, there's a lot of yellow tone underneath that vibrant orange, and unless we put it on, and when we put it underneath that yellow orange colour, it really shows through because watercolour is transparent. This will give it another dimension, and it's really important. Now, I mentioned at the start of this video that I'm using mixed media paper. I particularly love painting watercolour on mixed media paper because I believe it's really easy to work with. I've done a separate video on this, and I'll link it onto the top of the screen right now, and I'll also put it in the description box underneath this video. I'll continue to cover the petals in the yellow-orange tone as I go through. As I said at the start, the paints that I'm using for this tutorial are by Mungo. I really love these paints. A student of mine recommended them, and I've never looked back. If you haven't got the Mungo set that I'm using, maybe you could use an Indian yellow as an alternative colour to the yellow orange that I'm applying on each petal in turn. I really recommend that you watch this video all the way through. When you're painting in watercolour, it can look really messy and really untidy halfway, and when I was teaching myself how to paint, I frequently ditched the painting because I believed that it was wrong. But honestly, stick with me and you'll see that it all comes together in the end, pushing past that really awkward stage. Here you can see me using a flat synthetic brush to blend the paint together on the paper. Now this brush is a miracle worker for me because it also means that you can kind of wiggle it against the paper to eradicate any mistakes, and you can also lift paint out with it as well as using it as a blending tool. So I highly recommend this little brush. So just working through petal by petal, just using my number 2 or number 4 size spotter and just applying the paint like this, just on the petals at this stage. And obviously just speeded this up for you and repeating the process. I've mixed a very watery mix of permanent red along with the scarlet for these other petals, which really do have a sort of more kind of reddy undertone than the others, but it really doesn't matter if you want to put the yellow tone on all of the petals, but these have got a definite red tone, and you see how it all makes sense a bit later on. So this is a very weak wash. It's our base wash, what I call the template wash, and this means that we are going to be building on the colours a little bit later on as we work through. This gives us an idea of where we're going to apply the stronger colours, therefore taking the guesswork out. I've completed the process on all of the 3 flower heads, or 4 flower heads that we have here. I've cleaned down my palette, and using my really old stubby spotter brush, I'm now mixing the greens. So to begin with, I've got sap green here that I'm mixing with a little bit of, a little bit of ultramarine, and also a tiny bit of deep phthalo green. I noticed that the stalks or stems of some of the flowers have a kind of blue undertone, which is why I'm using the ultramarine with the sap and a sort of weak consistency on this particular stem here. And it wasn't until I started painting this that I noticed that actually I think I've put the stem in slightly the wrong place, but it doesn't matter. So if you've noticed that before you start painting, you can maybe make an adjustment, but I still don't think it really stands out that much. So I'm going to just carry on painting. Using the sap green on its own for the more vibrant colour greens that you can see here, switching between the 3 mixes on my palette, looking at my reference photographs as I go through. You'll notice that I'm using a number 2 size spotter, and yet again, sort of using it in a similar way to a felt tip pen, almost like colouring in. It kind of takes the stress out of watercolour painting, giving you full control of your brush. Now, earlier on at the beginning of this tutorial, I mentioned that we have a free reference photograph and line drawing to accompany this tutorial, and you can have access to these if you join our private Facebook group, and I'll put the link in the description box underneath this video. And we have reference photographs and line drawings to all of our tutorials here on YouTube. So if you join us there, we are a fast-growing community, and you can post up your finished paintings from the tutorials and get some feedback both from me and all our other lovely group members. So do consider joining us there. So with that first green wash now dry, I'm just using the paint that is dried on the palette to add some dimension, as you can see, using my brush to blend in the paint into the existing wash like this with a damp brush. Once again, go into my flat synthetic number 2 size brush, and you can see how I'm just using it damp to blend these washes together like this. You can also use it to tidy up any edges that you may have gone outside the pencil line. And this is a number 0 size spotter to add a little more detail. Just completing the process on the stems of the daisies like this. So I'm adding some deep phthalo green and again the ultramarine to give it that kind of bluey tone, and as you can see the paint on my palette is dried yet again, making it easier to handle when I'm painting these smaller areas like this. At the beginning of this tutorial, I mentioned that this week's video is sponsored by Evolve, so I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about them. Evolve are an online structured art tutorial platform offering a truly modern approach to art education. Evolve's system demystifies the creative process, breaking it down into simple parts, making it super easy to understand. Their Art Foundation course is carefully structured and broken down into 4 blocks, each having its own set of exercises. And what I love about the course is that Evolve gives you access to one exercise at a time, which means that you learn each concept well without rushing to the next. So this carefully structured program ensures guaranteed results within just 1 year. It starts with Evolve teaching the very basics of art techniques in block 1, and within a year students progress to making beautiful oil paintings like this in block 4. When you sign up to Evolve, all the materials you need will be shipped right to your door. Evolve will send you the finest artist materials, and these are included at no additional cost to you. Evolve have taken great care and sourced the highest quality supplies to ensure their students achieve excellent results. You will be working in oil paints because oil really is the most forgiving medium, but the methods and techniques you will learn can be applied to any form of art. You will receive Old Holland paints, brushes, palette knife, canvases, palette paper, linseed oil, plus professional quality photographic reference photographs which are specifically tailored to each assignment. But there's more. The concepts taught in the Evolve Art program have been meticulously refined, allowing students to create incredible art like this in just 1 year. Evolve offers the shortest path to gaining the skills necessary to create art without limitation. Evolve's instructors are always on hand to help you every step of the way, guiding you through on a daily basis. This includes one-on-one mentoring, as well as group chats, homework rooms, creating a space where friendships are made in small or large groups. Evolve guarantees to check homework assignments within 24 hours of submission, which means that students are in control of their progress and receive feedback in a time frame that produces real momentum in their learning. Plus, you can move on to the next assignment without any lengthy delay. As an Evolve student, you will also have access to an international artistic community, as well as homework rooms, online chat, and the private Facebook group. And because Evolve is available worldwide, it allows students to communicate from anywhere in the world. Evolve are offering a free 15-minute course, which I will link in the description box underneath this video. I have looked at this course and it is extremely informative, so do take a look for yourself. And just one more thing before we carry on with the tutorial. Evolve are offering a discount of $100 to the first 10 people who sign up to their full course. So you'll need to be quick if you'd like to receive this discount. If you'd like to take advantage of this offer and receive $100 off their full course, then I'll put the coupon code Campbell100 in the description box below, so be sure to take a look. Okay, let's get back to the tutorial. So with that colour in place, I've cleaned down my palette and we can switch our attention again to the centre of the part this time mixing yellow-orange with a tiny bit of sap, as you can see here, once again in a kind of watery consistency. And we have the permanent red with a bit of ultramarine to create this kind of burgundy tone. As you can see, it's slightly thicker here. We want that to be a really sort of dark burgundy colour, and I'm working on the central part of the Gerbera Daisies at this point. Now the green tone that you see at the top of the palette there is actually for the sort of blurred centre part on these little daisies, but I'm just dropping in the purple tone wet in wet because I wanted to have a lovely sort of natural blur. I'm just adding a tiny bit more of the permanent red. You can see the colour switches sort of as you work through the central part, and the top part of this part of the daisy is definitely more of a red tone. If you look at the reference photograph, you'll see what I'm talking about. And just gently manipulating that paint around. Picking up some of that green tone to add around the outside edge of the centre here. You'll notice that where the two colours merge, you have this kind of gentle blur of a green colour, and if you put this in, it really does make it look a little bit more natural, so do consider adding that. And switching to the bottom daisy, doing the same process. You can see by dropping in that colour wet and wet how it gives it this really lovely natural soft edge, which I really, really love. And adding the green tone once again to the base of the petals on the upper Gerbera daisy like this. remember, this is just our base tone. We need to let it dry before we can apply any detail. And I'm just using a damp brush to merge those colours together like this. And you can see how I'm dotting in that burgundy kind of purpley tone onto the damp paint to let it gently merge into the wash that we've applied. As I said, I was sorely tempted to leave this centre of this particular Gerbera as it was because I really liked that look, but I decided to continue. But you can leave it if you want to, it's entirely up to you. It's your painting, so you do whichever you prefer. So you can see how I'm adding more pigment here. This is a sort of watered down version of the orange. We have the yellow tone that we used along with a tiny bit of scarlet. So once again, I'm using the flat synthetic brush to merge these colours together. So now that everything's dry, we can start to really build up the centre of these flowers like this. Notice once again how the paint on my palette has dried, and I'm just adding a tiny bit of water to have full control of the paint at this stage. This is the burgundy tone. I'm slightly off shot there with my paint, but it is the scarlet and the French ultramarine, or the ultramarine, that I'm adding. And you can see that the colour is exactly the same as the colour that I've used earlier on. Now already these Gerbera daisies are taking shape even before we apply that beautiful, vibrant kind of orangey, fiery red tone that we have, and that underpainting of the undercolour of that beautiful yellow will still come through, but they look pretty as they are. Of course, we are painting texture in the middle of these Gerbera daisies by using a stipple in motion like this, and you can see how I'm almost negatively painting around some of the shapes. And we're going to complete the process on the others like this, and making sure that it's completely dry. I've cleaned down my palette to focus on these absolutely beautiful petals. So we'll go from the top. We have scarlet, scarlet with red, and red with scarlet, if that makes sense. Noticing, pay close attention to your reference photograph now. Some of the daisies have more of the red tone, orangey tone than others, but it's entirely up to you how much pigment that you add at this point. Noticing how I applied the paint wet on dry and then blending it in with my brush as I did before. Now you'll need to be patient with this one because it's a repetitive process that you have to do to all of the petals, but it's such a beautiful painting to complete. So take your time with it and enjoy it. I'm applying the paint wet on dry, as you can see, dipping between the mixes of red and orange within my palette, using my discretion as to which colour goes where. Just keep looking at your reference photograph to see where you think it's going to be needed. Some of the petals definitely have a more of a reddy tone, so there you will put the permanent red tone as opposed to the scarlet. I'm going to show you the process on some of the petals, and I'll do the rest of that particular element off screen so that it saves you watching every single petal that I'm painting. So I'll just explain the colours that I have on my palette again. We have scarlet with yellow at the top. The two middle portions are scarlet and, two portions of scarlet. One is a slightly thicker consistency, and we have the permanent red with scarlet as well on the bottom. What you really want to achieve here with your paints on your palette is just different tones, different hues if you like. So we need an orangey hue with a bit of yellow, an orangey tone and a red tone. So just see what you have within your palette. It's really important that at this stage, when you apply your paint like this, that the underlying paint is dry. So you're working wet on dry. If you work wet and wet now, your paint will merge, and you don't want that. You want the paint to be completely dry before you do this layering or glazing process, as it's also known. So we're glazing a watercolour on top of another colour. So I'll continue the rest of this process off camera and come back to you in a moment. Okay, so I haven't done all of the petals because I wanted to show you once more how I completed these vibrant colours. So using exactly the same mixes on my palette, we have the yellow tones, the orangey tones and the very red tones, and I'm flitting between the two. I'm not staying photo accurate at this point. I sort of thought I wanted to give it a little bit more dimension, and I sort of made it up using a bit of artistic license to add a bit more colour where I felt it was needed. You can see me applying the red-yellow tone, the reddy orangey tone here in a slightly thicker consistency. So at this point you want the paint to be a little less watery and have a lot more pigment. So make sure that when you mix your pigments up, you add less water but more pigment, but you want the paint to be movable. You don't want it to be sticky and dry. Because watercolour is a transparent medium, you can still see that beautiful yellow tone that we applied at the beginning underneath the petals like this. Almost looks like it's on fire. These colours are so bold and so vibrant. I absolutely love them. And it really does, because I'm working on the mixed media paper, I really think, and it's my personal opinion, that it makes this blending process so easy to do. So check out the video in the description box underneath this video where I explain in a little bit more detail why I prefer that particular paper as well as my also favoured cold pressed. So just check that out after you've watched this video. I'll continue with this process on all of the petals, again looking at my reference photograph for guidance to see where I want to keep that variation in place. What I don't want is all the petals to look the same. I want them to look as if they have a little bit of dimension by doing it this way, and I'll complete the process for all of them like this. All of the petals are now complete, and you can see how beautiful and vibrant they look. I'm using my flat synthetic brush to lift out some of the orangey red tone like this, which gives it another dimension still. So we can see how I've lifted out certain elements just to give it a bit more vibrancy, and also to create a sort of negative shaped vein to give it some form like this, patting it dry with my kitchen paper. And you can see how easy it is with this mixed media paper to lift out the paint with a very, very gentle pressure and then just patting it dry. So when I'm happy with that, it's time to mix up some more colour for the centre. Now, I did say earlier on a couple of times that I really did like the centre of these as they were. So if you want to leave yours with a kind of less structured middle, you're welcome to do that. Like I said, it's your painting, but I decided to show you how I would complete the process by mixing the what do we have here, permanent red, and again the ultramarine, and dropping it in like this using a stipple in motion. Once again, at this point, the paint needs to be slightly thicker so that you have more control. I've also got a petal on the top there of it contains more red so that we can have a bit of variation within that centre. I'm using a number 0 size spotter for this. So you want something with a really fine point. You can see how detailed it is at this stage. Really enhancing the base of the stamen here, where it hits the petal to create a really sharp edge. Once again, using a stippling or patting dab in motion to create texture within the middle of each of these flower heads. I just added a tiny bit more of the red tone there because I just felt that it needed it. It was a little bit flat. Once I'm happy with the depth of colour within the petals, you can see I've added a tiny bit of the colour that we used for the middle of each petal, and I have a tiny blob of that colour on the bottom here, and I'm using this as a shadow tone. Applying it where I feel I need it. Now you could go crazy here and apply this colour and most, if not all, of the petals to give them another dimension. But I just added it here and there just to give it a little bit of a 3D look. I've just added a little bit of water to that burgundy mix that we had to do this. And you can see that it really does make a difference, making those beautiful petals stand out. So just take your time with it. Painting should be enjoyed and not rushed, right? So as you can see, I'm just adding some of the burgundy tone to sharpen up some of the edges here to add a little bit more definition. And just completing the process until it's complete.